The clock that chimed after. The first time it happened, I laughed. The glass slipped from my hand, struck the kitchen tile, and shattered. Clean, sharp, final. I stood there, staring at the mess, already rehearsing the irritation I'd feel later when I cut my finger cleaning it up. Then the clock chimed. One soft note. Late. I glanced at the wall. The clock was old, wooden case, pendulum hidden, a relic from my grandfather's house. It chimed on the hour, always had. It wasn't due to make a sound for another 20 minutes. Malfunction, I said aloud, because naming something reduces it. I swept up the glass. I forgot about the chime. The second time, it was harder to ignore. I was in the shower when the power cut out. The bathroom fell silent except for the sudden absence of water pressure. I stood there, dripping, irritated more than alarmed. 3 seconds later, the clock chimed. Not loud, not accusatory, just punctual in the wrong direction. I stood very still, water cooling on my skin, and felt something settle in my chest. Not fear yet, but attention. That night, I sat in the living room and watched the clock. Nothing happened. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. The clock never chimed before anything. It never warned. It never predicted. It confirmed. A book slipped from the shelf. The clock chimed. A distant siren passed, cutting off abruptly. The clock chimed. My phone buzzed with a message that changed everything I thought I knew about someone I trusted. The clock chimed. Always after. Always just late enough to feel intentional. I unplugged it. The chime still came. I started testing it. Small things at first, controlled things. I dropped a pen. Nothing. I waited. Nothing. I frowned, then deliberately knocked a glass from the table. It shattered. 1 second passed. 2. Then, chime. I felt cold, not in my body, but behind my eyes, like a pressure building where certainty used to live. It wasn't responding to accidents. It was responding to outcomes. Sleep became difficult. I began to notice how many moments passed unmarked, how many actions occurred without consequence. The clock stayed silent through most of them, but when something final happened, when something crossed a line, it chimed. I stopped answering calls. I stopped opening messages. I stopped doing anything that felt irreversible. The silence grew heavy. One night, lying awake, I heard the chime. Once. Soft. Close. I sat up, heart pounding. Nothing had happened. The apartment was unchanged. No noise, no interruption, no clear event to anchor the sound to. I waited for the feeling that usually followed, the recognition, the understanding. It didn't come. That was worse. From then on, I lived in a state of delay. Every moment felt borrowed, unconfirmed. I'd drink half a cup of coffee and pause, waiting to see if the clock would respond. I'd step into the street and freeze on the curb, listening. Silence. It felt like living between parentheses. Once, I stood in front of the mirror too long and had the sudden, overwhelming sense that something essential had already happened, that the version of me capable of reacting was gone. The clock didn't chime. I started to suspect it only acknowledged things once they were accepted by reality, not by me. The final night, I sat beneath the clock with the lights off. I needed to know. I whispered, "What did I miss?" The clock was still. Then, without warning, chime. I gasped, scrambling to my feet, searching the room for damage, for loss, for proof. There was nothing. No sound, no movement, no change I could identify. But the air felt different, thinner, settled, like dust after a collapse I hadn't heard. I realized then what terrified me most. The clock wasn't late. I was. Now I live carefully. I listen more than I act. Sometimes hours go by without a sound, and I almost believe I've learned how to exist safely again. But every so often, the clock chimes in the quiet. And I'm left wondering what part of my life just concluded without ever asking my permission.